And on behalf of the Odyssey team, I'd like to express our gratitude to you, our listeners, for supporting the show for all this time. Thanks for making us a part of your family.
Hello everybody, welcome to Odyssey Geek. This is episode number 7. I'm Austin, and today I'm very happy to have another guest on the show. This person is probably familiar to most of you out there. He's been around the audio drama fan community for quite a while, and this is his first time on the podcast. So, welcome, Christopher Green.
Thanks, Austin. Happy to be on the show.
And this is your first time on like a full-fledged Adventure Odyssey podcast, am I correct?
That is correct.
Christopher actually co-hosted Audio Theater Central pretty recently, and he did such a great job there, and he'd do a great job here too.
Exactly. Now I feel like a famous person just doing the press tour rounds or something.
Yeah. Where can we get a copy of your book?
In the future, I suppose.
So start the pre-orders now, people.
Yeah, probably like 50 years in advance or something.
Well, today we have a really interesting discussion. Today we are going to be talking about Adventure Odyssey, of course. And Adventure Odyssey has been around for over 30 years, getting close to 35 before too much longer. And the question we're going to tackle today is, why has Adventure Odyssey lasted so long?
Let's do it.
Alrighty, here we go. So, Adventures in Odyssey actually isn't the longest running radio drama in the world.
What?
I know I probably thought that at one point. But actually, I think at least in the US, there is another Christian audio drama called Unshackled that's been running since 1950. So that's 70 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And they still, well, not with the shutdown stuff happening right now, but they usually record like before the live audience with live sound effects and live music and the actors reading the scripts, which is, I'd really like to go to one of the recordings someday. I think that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that'd be exciting.
Yeah. And actually, I believe the longest running scripted audio drama in the world is a radio soap opera on the BBC called The Archers. And I believe its first episode aired in May 29th, 1950. And I think Unshackled aired their first episode on September 23rd, 1950. So basically, both of them have been around for about 70 years. But The Archers have Unshackled beat out by just a little bit.
BBC audio drama is just, I feel like, a fascinating study in the world of audio drama, in the sense that over here in North America, that, you know, audio drama kind of took a hiatus when TV became popular, and then it became sort of a thing again in like, with like the 80s with Adventures in Odyssey, and then especially at the advent of new media and things like podcasting and online distribution, for a lot of indie productions, has kind of made it kind of be more of a thing here in North America. But it never really stopped being a thing in Britain, which is fascinating to me. You know, there's always been some form of audio drama, even when TV came in. And I'd really be interested at some time to go into a deep dive onto why that is. I don't know why that is, but it would be an interesting thing to look into.
Well, I think one of the reasons is both Unshackled and I think The Archers also is it's very minimal sound effects. A lot of it I don't think there's a lot done in post-production. So it's like, fast, easy, cheap. And I think that's one of the reasons why those shows have been around for so long. And Odyssey is quite different because that's one of the first things that came to my mind thinking about why Odyssey has lasted so long or why it's so popular. The people that produce it, they have such a commitment to quality when it comes to writing, when it comes to acting, when it comes to sound design. And like back in the 1987 when the show officially started, sound effects, the soundscapes weren't near as big as they are now.
Sure.
Like if you compare the first episode, Whit's Flop, to an episode today, or like the Jake Muller Adventures or G.A. Henty or something like that, you're going to hear a total difference. But at the time, it was pretty impressive for its time.
Oh, for sure.
As the technology has changed, they've been able to make the show sound even better.
In a sense, I think you could give Odyssey the award for the longest running, like it's almost another genre in the sense that, or almost another medium, almost, I guess I mean, in the sense that a lot of, you know, like BBC productions or are more in, like you say, that old time radio fashion where, or like Unshackled is doing, where you're in front of a live studio audience. And, you know, it's more of a play. Like they would say, you know, an older term we hear is radio plays. But Odyssey has never been a radio play, unless you count like, you know, a few of the live episodes they did. But outside of that, it's never been a radio play. It's closer to the movie versus the stage play, you know, kind of thing. It's closer to that. And I think that's why, like you say, it's got that immersive soundscape that you would not hear in a live production, because it's just not feasible to really do. So that it really, really draws out that that quality, and that commitment to quality, like you mentioned, you know. And they've done so many amazing, like, I'm somebody who got into working on audio and audio production because of listening to Adventures in Odyssey. And I feel like I'm definitely not alone in saying that, that there's lots of people that have gotten their hand into, whether it's been writing, acting, or some form of media production because of listening to something like Adventures in Odyssey, you know? And just the way that they were able to work with sound effects and things has just always impressed me.
Yeah, exactly. And also, too, at the time when Odyssey first came around, a lot of people were totally focused on the family and the people there. Like, this isn't going to catch on. Kids aren't going to be listening to the radio. They're going to just be watching, like, cartoons all the time or that kind of stuff. And they're not going to want to listen to the radio, to stories. And those people that said that, I'm glad were proved wrong, that because they did such a good job at making a compelling story, most of all, and, you know, getting great actors to make these characters come to life. Basically, Odyssey was ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they brought some of the actors that were on old time radio, like Parley Bear, Hal Smith, Janet Waldo, Alan Young, and basically they upgraded the kind of radio dramas that had been done before. And I think probably around that time, the most elaborate radio dramas at the time. And since then, other Christian, other family-friendly audio dramas, and even the secular world has done more audio drama. But I think even still, Odyssey is a gold standard when it comes to quality overall for, writing, acting, sound design, things of that sort.
Absolutely. I totally agree on that. I think, they really have set a standard. They've shown how it can be done, and they've made it viable in a world where that it was just an underdog medium at the time, you know. I think around that time, maybe the only kind of thing I can think of that at least that I'm aware of that would have been like a similar kind of approach and everything would have been actually the Star Wars radio dramas that came out. They had they're described as simple, but honestly, they did better than a lot of productions today. So they did a good job. They went immersive, but yeah, no, it worked. And it's interesting too that it, like you say, it's still working. People are still interested, and like you say, it was ahead of its time with now the advent of new media, and podcasting and kind of thing like that. It works so much better. And yeah, it is that gold standard. I've heard a lot of other shows, and some are good, and then we're getting more and more that are rivaling that level, but no one's been doing it as long or as consistently.
Yeah, and also too, like you said, a lot of people were inspired to do their own shows from Odyssey, and I think Odyssey is kind of like lifting other people up or lifting other shows up because of them being around for so long. And I know I've talked with some of the people that work on Odyssey, and they have been super, super nice people, and some of them have helped me out on, if I ask them questions, or some people, if I asked them if they would play a role here and there. They've been so great to work with and great to talk to, and the people behind it, they're really, they love their fans, and they really try to reach out to them. And I think that also, too, if you have people behind a show that are horrible people might like the show, but, you know, if they try to, send a fan mail or interact with them, then the show would probably suffer some, fan loss. But, Odyssey, the fans have stuck around for many years, or they may go away for a while, like, if they grow up a little bit and they may not hear and then come back. But the people in the show have been really, really nice. And I think that's also another plus as well.
I think you kind of touched on one of your other points here, which is the acting too. When you mentioned some of the people involved as well and the actors and things, they have high quality actors, caliber actors. And I would say that, if you check out a new indie audio drama, that's usually one of the things that sticks out. And it's the hardest thing to overlook. Like, you can overlook quality sometimes, but the acting is really hard to overlook, especially when the actors are your only guide to the story as a listener, compared to a film where, maybe the acting's bad, but you might say, well, the acting was pretty terrible, the story was pretty bad, but the VFX were cool. And you don't really have as much of that excuse in something like this. So, but they're using, like, not just like a lot of these people are well-known actors and not well-known, like they threw in their time doing Odyssey and then they got well-known. No, like, they were well-known before they came to Odyssey. I think of Jess Harnell and how I was amazed when I figured out, oh, wait a minute, he's like Wacko from the Animaniacs and, like, all these other cartoon voices. And it was like, whoa, like, these are pretty big people out there that are doing some pretty amazing things.
Yeah. And there's another thing, too, that I think has contributed to Odyssey's longevity is the lessons and the moral in the shows. They're timeless, but they also address modern topics. Like, early in the show, divorce, like with Connie's parents, and I think one episode with eating disorders, and then later on with abortion. And as, time has progressed, it's been, over 3 decades now. And also, fairly recently with the Truth Chronicles, talking about, like, absolute truth, about having a Christian worldview, like apologetics, and also with the Ties That Bind, which tackles the subject of, traditional family, what family is, the role that God plays in our society. I'm looking at doing a topic like this for a future podcast, but Odyssey does a really good job of bringing down those complex issues, those complex things that's happening in our world, and break them down to a kid's level, and not be, and a lot of times what they try to do is, they don't try to go overwhelmingly into the subject, because they want to leave some up to the parents to discuss with their kids. But Odyssey is a launching pad for those discussions that kids can have with their parents. Not necessarily like, the final say on everything. They always want the parents to have the final say on it. And, if there is a topic or a more sensitive episode, they might have a parental warning on it to let parents know about that. But I think that's one thing too, because, the lessons they teach, honesty, truthfulness, things like that, those are timeless things. But, since they do keep up with the times enough to talk about the things that kids are dealing with, that families are dealing with, and whatever time Odyssey is playing is, I think, a great quality that they have.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And like we said, because Odyssey is so into making sure that the product that they make is a quality production, it catches the eyes or ears of people more than just its primary audience, which is like 8 to 12 and like Christian families. But I've seen and read and heard of people that, aren't Christians that listen to Odyssey and enjoy the show. They may not agree with everything in the show and the lesson being taught, but since the stories are so good and the quality of the show is so good, there are many people that might not have been Christian before and are now. Maybe some also that, listen to it up in a Christian household and maybe aren't anymore, but they still like to listen to Odyssey. So Odyssey really is like the show that basically, it's, I guess if you consider like a 4-quadrant or more than that, 4-quadrant show that gets everybody.
That's really interesting. I don't think I'd heard before this actually of anyone that was unsaved that has listened to the show. So that's really neat to hear. That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, I see some stuff that people have written, and some of it's like from a very, cynical or very, very unchristian like. But when it comes down to, people still, they still find some good things to say about it, and hopefully, if there are unchristians listening to it, that they'll be impacted by it, because what goes in is what comes out. So
absolutely, and I think that's the example that we want to have in Christian media, right? We want to have a show that's good enough that, like, and when I say good enough, I don't mean like, oh, just barely good enough. I mean like it's good and good caliber, and we're doing it with excellence, doing our work as unto the Lord in our terms of excellence, so that even those who are unsaved, they're not going to be put off by, because there's like let's pick on movies for a minute, right? There's been it's becoming less and less of an issue, but especially years ago, there was a huge discrepancy between the quality level in Christian movies and secular movies, where you wanted to love the Christian movie, but it was really hard because it had heart, but it just wasn't done well. And so it would have been hard to maybe attract a non-Christian viewer to that movie, because they just couldn't get past maybe the hokiness. And so that's been improving, but with Odyssey, it's got that quality right out of the gate, that, like you say, that even if when you're listening to I've listened to secular productions that are professionally done that are not even half the caliber of Odyssey. And so that quality is standing out on its own. And, moving into our next topic here, like one of those quality things and one of those things to engage people and help draw them in is the fact that it has so many different genres. Where I live, I feel like people say it here, but I feel like people say it honestly just about everywhere. But where I live, we have a lot of changing weather. So they say if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes and it'll change. And that's a little bit like Odyssey. If you didn't like the genre of Odyssey, just wait an episode or two. It'll be a different genre, and give that one a try. Because there's so many different ones. Like, Austin's compiled a great list here. We've got BTV ones, we've got Bible stories, we've got comedy, we've got history, we've got mysteries, we've got kids radio, we got musicals, we got westerns, we got holidays, we got slice of life. There's been a couple sci-fi episodes too. One of my favorite ones. I think this was actually, was it a BTV or a kids radio? I'm not sure, but it was called Hidden in My Heart, I think.
Yeah, that was a kids radio episode,
and it has the Star Trek parody with the whole thing where they go in and they've got what do they call them, the ding dongs or whatever, which were the lying guys. And I don't know,
I'm being tempted.
And I've watched a lot of Star Trek, so for me, it had this extra just hilarity to me, where I'm like, oh my goodness, I love their Captain Kirk kind of parody guy, and the way he just talked, and just it's just so funny. But that's the thing, right? A show that can a show that can make me cry from the depth, a show from where I can listen to the Novacom saga, and oh man, I remember when Connie thought that Mitch had died and everything like that, and I was like when I heard that might have been I mean, maybe this says I was sheltered as a kid, I don't know, but that was probably the most biggest emotional thing for me in my life at that point. I was because I grew up with Connie, right? So it's there's that almost like a friendship in a sense, where I'm one of my best friends, someone really close to them just died, and she is going through it right now. And it just, it was heart-wrenching, and And then we've got other things, just crazy, silly things like the Hid in My Heart example. And yet it doesn't feel like a multiple personality disorder of a show. It's cohesive. And an amazing example of that is within that Novacom saga, as Connie is dealing with her grief, there's this whole little sort of mini story of her and Wooten going to the carnival, going to laser tag as he's trying to cheer her up. And it's so silly. And you've got one of the debatably most ridiculous characters in all of Odyssey, Wooten Bassett, helping Connie go through one of the most emotionally heart-wrenching circumstances of the entire show as well. And you've put those two extreme things together, and it didn't feel forced or weird or corny. It felt like a very sweet storyline there, and I think that also goes to a testament to the quality of the writing, the acting, and part of why it is so loved,
Yeah, exactly. And the strength that Odyssey has is because if they just did episodes, chronicling the life of Whit and the kids and Connie, Eugene, and Woot and all these people, they would run out of stories, I think, really quickly, and it could turn into like a soap opera where it's basically like the Archers. Basically, it's, very extreme situations or very, over dramatic and unrealistic. But since they have the opportunity, do like a variety show here or a mystery here and do holiday specials and this kind of stuff, there's a lot more leeway for them to get more stories out of the show. And
totally.
There may be, some overlap. Like after the last hiatus, there were some episodes that seem pretty similar to some older shows. I mean, that's kind of bound to happen after so many years, but still, since they have, different characters, different situations, there are so many different ways to go at a story now, even though it may have like the same moral or maybe a few of the same characters, but they're able to do so many different ways to show a lesson or show a story.
Well, and I think that's good too, right? Because, in a similar fashion to, when you go to church, maybe you've heard your pastor speak about grace, but it just didn't hit you that day. Maybe you didn't sleep well last night, so you weren't paying attention. Maybe you were too hungry, whatever it might have been, right? It just didn't hit you the right way. Maybe the way he phrased it didn't quite get it to you, but it did for someone else. And, 2 years later, you're back at church, same pastor, and he's preaching a slightly different message on grace, but it hits you that time. And I think it's similar to that with Odyssey, like there's a lot of different ways that you can make analogies for the same message to get it across to a specific person where they're at, But kind of like backpedaling a little bit here to what you were just saying about characters and stuff too. I think that's another one of the strength of Odyssey is both the caliber of characters, great, well-written characters that we've gotten to see arcs. Some of them's arcs are cut a little shorter than I'd like to because they got too old for the show. I say that in air quotes, too old for the show. I mean, that's kind of an arbitrary decision they've made, but I digress. But the thing is, they've also written it in a way, as good ensemble cast shows do, that Odyssey can function without even major key characters. We saw that over a period of time when they were looking for a new Whit,
yep,
to a new guy to play Whit. We saw that over a period of time, and quite frankly, long life and happiness to Andrei Stoichkov, however you pronounce his name. Hopefully he's doing Whit for a long time. But when comes the time that he is no longer doing Whit, I would be perfectly fine and almost think it's about time that Odyssey moves on without Whit. I'm okay with Odyssey without Whit. I know that's maybe a controversial opinion, but to me, Whit has been a big part of Odyssey, but he is not the actual heart of Odyssey. If anything, I would almost debate to say that Connie, if there were as a main character to Adventures in Odyssey, it's not Whit, it's Connie. Because she has been with us from the beginning, with the same actress all the way through, no hiatus away. Connie's always been with us. But either way, even if Connie wasn't there, like, the show still works. It can live on forever because technically it's just about this town of Odyssey. Nothing else technically needs to be there for it to exist. But I'll let you respond to that because maybe I've opened a can of worms.
I'd probably disagree with you. I would be okay if there was another actor that played Whit after Andre wouldn't be able to anymore. But again, I think, well, I do kind of agree that Odyssey can survive without Whit. I mean, not necessarily forever, because actually the time that Jack and Jason were running Whit's End when after Hal Smith had passed away, some of those episodes during that era are some of my favorite episodes and probably some of the best episodes. And I think it was a great testing ground for them to show, hey, this show can do shows without, Whit or Connie and Eugene all the time. Well, Connie and Eugene at that time, were, made a little bit more of major characters, and then, Eugene was gone for a while too. And what I have here, there are some episodes where there's quite a bit of episodes that there's no major character, like our Whit, Connie, Eugene, and Wooten's considered a major character now too. I don't feel the greatest about pairing him with the original three, but there's episodes like there's like the episode like Break a Leg, where it's basically revolves all around Edwin Blackard and Shakespeare gets his leg broken because Cal was reckless with his bike, and it focuses on Edwin, Shakespeare, Alex, Cal, and a little bit of Crime Brian Dern. That's pretty much all the characters we know from previous episodes. And the episode is great. It's funny. It gives the characters a chance to shine on their own. Also like Heat Wave. That was an early episode where we had no major characters, or I might say like the adult characters, because it's just Jack and Oscar, Robin, and Digger Digwillow, and then there's Mr. Watson of the hardware store, basically. And that show is great. It's a classic episode.
Yeah.
And then also like Easy Money, where it's just basically Sam and Butch, and those are fairly minor characters, and there's a cameo from George Barkley, but the show has so many different characters, and they can create and bring characters in, bring some out, and the show still works in a lot of different ways. They can have episodes without the major characters and let them get the spotlight for a little while, and it works. It still works. It doesn't feel odd.
So maybe I should clarify here and see if you agree with this or not. When I say that I think it could work without Whit, and I'd be fine with them just like not replacing Whit with a new actor, it does still need the function of Whit, even if it doesn't need the character of Whit, in the sense that we had Jason and Jack kind of split some of Whit's characteristics while he was gone during that time. And we've at other times, and especially as time has gone on, we've seen characters like Connie kind of take on a bit of the Whit function in terms of giving kids advice and running Whit's End and things like that, so there's all that kind of thing. I guess for me, in any kind of series, any kind of show kind of thing or whatever, I've just always personally preferred that when they can't get an actor or actress back, that they just kind of write that character out and kind of give me a new character that serves the function, but is a new person. Because I don't know, I just, like I say, you've spent so much time with those characters and that actor portraying that character. It feels like your friend, that when you hear that other voice, you just feel like it's an imposter pretending to be your friend, and you just don't like them. I finally, and you're probably going to be like, oh my goodness, it took you this long, but I finally accepted Andre as Whit.
All right.
It took now, mind you, I'm way out of date on a lot of things, but I listened to The Green Ring way after it came out. And The Green Ring conspiracy made me kind of like, you know what? Yeah, this is Whit. This is not the guy. This is not Paul. This is not Hal, but this is Whit. Now, I will say, and this is probably, I think this is worth noting, the first Whit that I got used to was Paul Herlinger, and then I heard Hal Smith. So to me, Paul has always been Whit, So, it's not, I think I realize that is a personal bias then, you know what I mean? Because it doesn't have to do with who is there first. Well, this guy was the old guy, so he's better. It's just what I'm used to. And then there's kids now that the only way they know is Andre. And then one day they're going to listen to Paul and Hal, and they're like, who are these jokers? Like, give me my Whit, Mm-hmm. And, in the year 2077, when we've got Whit number 15, all of these guys will seem so irrelevant. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm saying I don't think they'll do it. I feel like if they lost Whit at this point, they probably just stop their show or something. But I'm hoping neither of those things happen, of course. But I would be okay if they kind of just adjusted it kind of thing. Because I also wonder, like, they're kind of setting up a precedent that these characters must all last forever. Because what happens when, how old is the actors for, Connie and Eugene at this point? They are probably about as old as Hal Smith was when he started in the role. Getting around there. So, I don't know. There becomes more and more of a disparity in age, but I suppose that the whole Connie age vortex is a whole other discussion.
Well, I know this is kind of a tangent, but there have been some people discussing, I'm not certain how recent of episodes you've heard, but there are some characters that on the show. One is Renee, who's actually only in the club episodes, that's kind of like a little bit like Connie, a little bit like Eugene, and she's a non-Christian, and she's also an employee at Whitson. There's another character, too, named Horace, who's a lab assistant for Eugene at the college, and he's kind of like Eugene a little bit, and a little more quirky. And also, Jason's still on the show, and recently introduced the character of Wilson Knox, who's the pastor in Odyssey, and recently Tom Riley's sister. And so, if there was a time for them to, have no Whit for a while, I think at this point now they have enough characters that they could fall back on or continue the show. And it remains to be seen if all those characters last more than, a few more years. But, yeah, Odyssey's strength, one of their biggest strengths is the characters that they create. And, people may not be able to know what their favorite episode is, but they usually have like a favorite character on Odyssey.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. It's hard to say your favorite episode because there's just so many now.
Mm-hmm. Over 900.
That's crazy.
Well, I don't know if 900 have been fully produced, but I know over 900 have been recorded. But since we're on that subject, what would be your favorite Odyssey character?
Oh, my favorite Odyssey character? A few years ago, I feel like maybe for people around our age, this might be common, but a few years ago, I would have said Wooten, but not really anymore. And it's not that I think that Jess Harnell is amazing, don't get me wrong. The writers are amazing, don't get me wrong. But it's a little bit like Larry the Cucumber. I thought he was the coolest when I was a kid, and then they just made every VeggieTales episode ever about him, and I was just like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it anymore. And I feel like that happens a lot in movies, particularly animated movies, or you get like the goofy character, and then they give them their own spin-off, and then you're kind of like, yeah, it doesn't work anymore. They're good as a sidekick, but I don't really want to hear stories about them all the time. And I'm not saying I don't like stories about Wooten. I do. I think he's a phenomenal character, but it's one of those things that, like, I don't know. I feel like also I'm sure as he's had to mature a little bit to make him believable at this point I don't know. It's a little bit of an imbalance to me, and it's one of those things where it's like, I like my goofy characters, but I like them in a level of moderation, and if you focus on them too much, it just kind of takes something away from them. I don't know why or how exactly the psychology of that is, but it does for me. So, but I still think Wooten's great. He's just not my favorite one anymore. I've always liked Connie. She's got a lot of depth and all that as a character. So I've always really kind of enjoyed everything with her. But I'm trying to think. I know, That is a well. I'll think on that for a second. Who's your favorite character?
Oh, wow. You're the guest host. You can't say stuff like that. I'm kidding. I kind of break it down to like my favorite adult character, my favorite kid character. Favorite kid character will be Jared Dwight. He's been my favorite for quite a while. My favorite adult character is probably Jack Allen. That's kind of surprising probably to some people, but I kind of, again, I talked about like how I liked a lot of the episodes when it was, in the Middle East, and and Alan Young too, probably, I think, brought a lot to the character, like his quiet demeanor. He has a little bit, a little bit of a sneaky side a little bit, but he's like, he describes himself as painfully polite. He's a very nice person, but he can in the right times, be very stern. But I would think he would be my favorite adult character. Wooten was for quite a while, but like you said, when the people focus too much on the quirky characters, or when they focus too much on the goofy people, then that can make you not like them quite as much.
Yep.
Which I like Wooten in moderation, which I think recently now Wooten and Penny, which is his wife, there are very few episodes now, which I kind of like, because I don't actually like Wooten and Penny together. But I think got to the point where the amount of episodes they're in now, I'm totally fine with that. But yeah, Jack Allen would be my favorite adult character. Jared Dwight would be my favorite kid character.
Those are really good choices. Great characters. And yeah, I feel like, yeah, Jared is definitely a favorite for sure. I was disappointed. I was excited when he came back after the Novacom thing, and then disappointed when he just, unceremoniously disappeared again. But what you gonna do? Springboarding off of that, I really liked his brother Trent. Thought he was really funny with his sort of imaginative, overactive imagination. Really reminded me of Isaac from some of the classic episodes, and his overactive imagination and things like that. I don't know. Something about their characters kind of reminded me of each other in certain ways. Yeah, I've also always liked Rodney. I've thought he's really funny. And the Rathbones in general. Not role models, but funny.
Yeah, those are good choices too. Well, I think we probably beat that topic to death. The next topic, but that was a lot of fun. One other thing I have down here is Odyssey, I think, has lasted so long is because it's not a visual medium. And it was for a little while. They did make cartoons out of it, but we don't talk about those. But one of the reasons why
I've seen all of them.
What are your opinions of them?
The cartoons?
Yeah.
Well, funny thing is, I actually saw the cartoons before I heard this show.
Wow. They're having people like that, I know.
Yeah, so if it weren't for the cartoons, I never would have actually heard them. Because I remember when I got an album, a cassette tape album for a birthday when I was young, and I was like, oh, it's another Odyssey cartoon. And they're like, no, that's not a cartoon. This is like tapes. I'm like, say what? How does this work? But it was the coolest thing, And then I was like, oh, well, this is awesome. And at first my parents were like, oh, are you disappointed it's not a cartoon? I'm like, no, it's got like 12 episodes instead of like one story. This is awesome. No, I thought they were good. I always wished that they had taken Dylan, the main kid they usually focus on in the cartoon ones, and gave him like a cameo episode at the time, but they never did that. I think they made those around the time, or at least some of those around the time they were searching for a Whit, because there was one episode, it was like a Western one, and the guy comes on the screen and he's talking as Whit. I'm like, that is not Whit. What is that? And it's not someone they ended up using. It wasn't Paul. It wasn't Hal. It's just some random dude. And it stuck out really weird. But
yeah, I think later on, when Paul Hurlinger came on, I think they redubbed his lines.
Interesting.
For that. So I think the newest versions may not have that anymore.
So mine's like my cassette tape is like a collector's item then.
Probably.
But yes, I've taken us off topic.
Oh no, that's fine. I mean, if that got you listen to Odyssey itself, that's awesome.
Yep.
But with it not being a visual medium, it's cheaper to make. I know Odyssey does take a lot of money to make and produce.
Sure.
But if this was a show that was like either a cartoon or something with real actors, then, you know, the money for it would be out of this world. And I don't think the show would have lasted as long. Like, I'm glad that Focus on Family, at the beginning, they didn't say, oh, let's just make a live action or a cartoon kids series. And they named it Adventures in Odyssey. I'm glad they didn't do that, because we probably would not be talking about Odyssey right now, really.
No.
But since they started as a radio drama and had faith in the medium, it's lasted so long.
Well, and I think about it, and I feel like this experience is, heard this from a lot of people at this point. The two places I listened to Adventures in Odyssey the most was, number one, for me personally, as a kid, I would listen to Odyssey going to sleep. I don't know, it just focused me and helped me sleep, so I'd put on Odyssey, and I'd go to sleep listening. So, you know, I'd oftentimes listen to the same, you know, CD or whatever 3 nights in a row, because I'd fall asleep before the CD finished. But yeah, and the other place would be the car. And those are two times I would not be able to do it if it was a TV show. Some people can fall asleep to the TV. I couldn't do that personally. So being able to listen kind of thing, or be able to listen when you're driving, is just it's a cool experience. In fact, the first time I heard Adventures in Odyssey was, like, besides the cartoons, was on the radio, on a local radio station. The station was barely coming in. It was an FM station. And I was like, what is this? I'm like, there's people, it's like a story. There's like, what is going on right now? I'm like, we have to get this station in. And I only heard like a scene, and I'm like, what was that? And I heard them say something about Mr. Whitaker, and I was like, that's like the guy in the cartoon. What's going on right now? So I thought it was pretty cool later when I did hear the audio drama, and that there were so many, that it wasn't just like, you know, oh, they just did this one radio adaptation. No, this was the main deal, and they've been doing it forever. So yeah, the lack of visual is amazing, you know, in the sense that it's not a visually produced medium, but there's a strong visual to the medium, in the sense that as you are listening it, you're really painting that picture, you know. And I think I mentioned this when I was on the Audio Theater Central podcast with JD, that I think in a way that helps the listener become more personally attached to the character, because you've played a hand in sort of creating that character in your mind. And so the locations, like what you imagine Whit's End looking like and what I imagine Whit's End looking like, could be very different, but to each of us that's a very personal thing. And so it's a place that we go, that in our mind, that other people go, but it's different for each of us. So it's so personal. And I think that also inspires and helps kids and adults as well to think creatively, you know, to inspire our minds and brains. And that's one of the beauties of the medium versus a video, is that where everything is just kind of like, here you go, this is what it is, kind of thing, you know. It inspires us to think.
Yeah, and it's also too, like, the listener, they kind of own part of the show, basically. Like,
absolutely,
this is what it sounds like. This is what I'm creating in my head to make it look like. Like for Whit's End, when I was a kid, my dad taught at a Bible college.
Okay,
and we went to the school cafeteria quite often. And that cafeteria to this day is pretty much how I imagine Whit's End when I'm listening. Like, when you go in the door to the left, there's a counter there where you got your food, and there's all the booths and the tables to the right there. And I just kind of imagine like stairs, which is like just a one story building, and I can imagine the stairs. And you know that it's a very personal thing. And then so like when you talked about with Connie with her when she thought that Mitch died, that was, you know, so emotional, because you've created in your mind like what Connie looks like. You've, you know, seen her struggles and seen her become a Christian, all this stuff. You get so attached to these characters that I don't think you would have that attachment if you could, you know, if you were watching them all the time and not just listening to them.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's also the multitasking factor, right? You could be doing dishes.
Yep.
Doing dishes and listening to audio drama. I've done that a bunch of times, or you know, cleaning up your you're vacuuming and you have your earbuds in and you're listening, and what have you. So it's one of those things. And even recently, this is very topical, but right now, as a lot of people have been at home due to circumstances in the world beyond our control at this point, for me, I have, with my work and everything like that, at the peak of all this, I was probably doing somewhere between somewhere around 8 plus Zoom / FaceTime calls a week. And so it was getting, and then all of my work, even work that wasn't traditionally on the computer, became work on the computer. And so by the end of the day, I mean, I wear glasses. My eyesight is not my strongest feature. My eyes were so tired and I was constantly getting headaches. And so at the end of the day, when I wanted to unwind, I didn't want to flick on Netflix. I didn't even want to pull out a book because I still had to look at the words. But I could put on a podcast. I could put on an audio drama. I could put on something like Adventures in Odyssey and listen and give my eyes a break.
Yeah, exactly. You're talking about listen to Odyssey as you go to bed. I still do that quite a bit, and there's certain episodes that not necessarily because they're boring, but my brain kind of thinks, okay, yeah, this is the episode that I listen to when I fall asleep, and usually before the episode's over, I'm asleep.
Well, it's comfort.
Yeah. I would think that too. I mean, I don't have it on my list here, but just when you mentioned that, it's a place people want to live in. It's a place people want to go to, and I think that's the appeal of it.
Absolutely,
I would say, especially nowadays, this is a place where we would want to live. The people that we want to see every day and interact with, and who wouldn't want to go on an imagination station adventure?
Absolutely. Here's maybe I know I got to stop asking you questions because I'm the guest, but I just want to hear what you think.
No, go ahead.
We haven't had a chance to. I don't think this is the first time we've actually talked in quote unquote person. I mean video call here, but so I'm just curious. If you could go to Whit's End and you could only do one thing there, what would you do?
I would think it would definitely be an imagination station adventure. I would say, I don't think I would put this on the list as a major thing, but I think the imagination station is one of the biggest factors, the biggest attractions, I guess you would call it, of Adventures in Odyssey. People may not remember the name of the episode, but they remember, oh yeah, that one has imagination station, or yeah, they go back and see this person here, or this person here.
And to tell those Bible stories, and see, the interesting thing is, it's not just telling the Bible story as a dramatization of that Bible story, which is great when those things happen too. Who is it? The Adventum that has been doing that, and doing that well. But one of the great things, especially for kids, I think, with the Imagination Station adventures that are Bible stories, is that you have someone a little bit like you who, and sees things maybe at your age level and things like that, who can kind of be our guide to the story, kind of our intermediary between us and the story, to help people understand things that, I mean, let's face it, the Bible was written over, quite a long time ago, and so, and not written in English either. It's been translated. And so, and beyond even just translating it, we're also talking about vastly, vastly different cultures that, between our own and the time that it was written in, and the customs and things that they had. So to understand those things, especially as a child, is tricky. It's tricky for us even as adults. No matter how much we learn about the Bible, there's always so much more to learn. And so to have someone a little bit like us, one of the kids that we've become familiar with on Odyssey, to be a guide for us is really cool. Or on the flip side, and they've done this a number of times too, where it's not a kid that we're familiar with on Odyssey. This is one of their first time showing up, and this is used as a familiar vehicle then for us to kind of get to know the character too, and form an attachment. Like, we've gone on an adventure together. Yeah, like, I remember this guy. Like, we went on an adventure together. We're old pals now,
Yeah. And again, I guess what you're talking about there, kids can picture themselves being in those situations. In the imagination station, eating at Whit's End, you're gonna picture yourself, and even as adults, at least speaking for myself, I can picture myself, in certain situations and certain characters, and also kind of go into our next topic, which is because Odyssey isn't just for kids. And it kind of irks me when people call it just a kids show because it's not. It's very much for everybody. And like the people that when you were kids you might have related with, like, you know, Sam or Lucy or Jack or Jared or these kids, and then when you're older you might relate more with like Eugene or Connie or Jason and these people, because, you know, the stories are written so well and the stories tell situations that adults and the things they have to deal with, and also kids as well. I think that's one reason Odyssey has been around so long. It's because it's not just for kids. If it was just for kids, it might not have as big of an impact. But because they have enough in it for everybody, from the youngest kids to the oldest kids, teenagers, the moms and dads, grandparents, there's still something for everybody.
Well, I think that's also too because, you know, it's a show that at its core is hoping to, you know, do two things really, right? You know, I mean, think about who is producing it. It's focus on the family. So naturally they're interested in not just giving positive family friendly entertainment to children, but also to do it in a way that is going to bring the whole family into the room. That's going to keep the interest of mom, dad, you know, the teenage brother, the younger sister, everyone, you know, in that same room, drawing them together. So that's one of their goals. So they it's in their best interest to make sure everybody can get into it. But the other thing is that at its core, right, it's teaching the truths and the principles of the Bible. And I know that you and I both believe that no matter where you are in life, whether it's your age, your stage, your whatever it may be, the Bible is for you. And so these principles being translated in ways that we can understand in our own lives and situations that apply in our own lives that are familiar with us, it has that application and we get so much out of it. You know, I'm sure you've had this too, many different times as an adult going through a situation, something that maybe is tricky in life, and then thinking back to something Connie said or Mr. Whitaker said or even Wooten said and going like, yeah, that thing they went through is kind of like this. And then it makes you remember that Bible verse they talked about that Chris used in the wrap up in the end. And you're like, yeah, that's what I'm going through right now. And God is able to use it then to nudge us along, you know? And so I think, yeah, with that, it's for all ages. And again, it goes even beyond the Christian aspects, but the actual production, the quality of production, and the levels of character. And that's why I know this is something that a lot of older fans have, especially ones who grew up with it, maybe have a little bit of a beef with. And I kind of alluded it to earlier. That's why I really wish they would let more characters age older.
Yeah.
You know, I think because of that, because it does appeal to every age group, but if there's any age group that I feel like they miss the most often, it's teenagers. And that's because when the kids hit puberty, they disappear from Odyssey, and then maybe they come back as a cameo as an adult, or we focus on stories with adults, but we tend to miss that kind of in between age group who still loves the show and would love to have someone like them. Characters like Aubrey, I always thought Aubrey Shepherd were a great character. She was one of the few teenage characters we got to kind of relate to, and going through, you know, a lot of those things and being like, wow, like this is a character I really relate to, you know? So I do wish they would let a few more characters like age. I understand it's also not just a factor of their decision, but also actors and their contracts and what they want to be doing at their point in their career. But yeah, there's so much for everyone.
Well, recently, right now, they have two characters, Jules and Buck, which are both teenagers, and I believe they were both introduced on the show as teenagers, and they're both non-Christians, and I think Odyssey has been able to do, I know they had like one episode where they were both learning how to drive or both got their driver's license, and they have right now they have the potential to do it. I don't think they have done as much as they could with them, but I think since they're both non-Christians, it's at this point, it might be a good idea to see, okay, these teenagers, like, you know, what are they dealing with and how can, because I won't say too much because I don't know how much you know about the show right now, but basically both of them are very closely connected to some of the major characters in the Odyssey that are Christians, and it gives an idea of, I guess, also to parents, like, how to reach, like foster kids or kids in your household that, don't believe the same as you do.
Mm-hmm.
And also for kids, like, okay, these are kids that are like me. And so I hope that if in one day they do have these, or one or both characters become Christians, that can also be a help to the teenagers listening as well.
Well, I think you just touched on a really good point, actually, about the parents there and dealing with, like, foster kids and things like that, because all through Odyssey, I have noticed that it's very common to have, kids going through something. You have a scene with the parents where they kind of pick up on that, and then the parents are having a conversation together, like, okay, should we let them learn by experience this time? Should we step in? And you're hearing the parents have those parenting conversations, which are useful things for parents listening too, about, like, okay, how to approach things, or how to even just sit down and talk together, So there's, so much. We could talk about that forever. But
yeah. And also too, like, the episodes we talked about, like, I'm sure you probably agree with this too, that some of the best episodes are the ones with parental warnings on them, because they're episodes that are maybe a little bit more serious, or a little more mature in the lessons and the things happening in the episode. Again, it's family friendly, clean content, but, like with, more harder topics or more intense situations. And also too, I mean, again, they get the parents involved. Like, hey, this may be an episode you may listen to with their kids, or preview to make sure if it's okay with them or not. And I remember, I think it might have been episode 500, or one of the retrospective episodes, where I think Steve Harris, one of the co-creators of Odyssey, talked about, for Odyssey, they made sure that they did not want to talk down to kids at all. Like, they talk to kids on their level. They don't put them aside, like, hey, what you're dealing with, oh yeah, it's nothing. They don't do that. They show the kid in a real situation and how kids can deal with it. And I think that's been a help to a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And also the jokes too. I mean, there's, jokes in there, or some lines in an episode that I had no idea what they meant, or didn't think they were that funny, but the older I got, and episodes I've listened to, for hundreds or tens, 20s, whatever, hundreds, so many times, and then I found out, oh yeah, I never noticed that before, or, little Easter eggs they've added in the episode. So the episodes themselves are, there's a lot of great replay value in a lot of them.
Totally. I mean, there's a bunch of elements in different episodes too, of, like, references to things. Even something as simple as a famous episode like A License to Drive. Like, the whole title is a pun on something the kids probably never heard of.
And also, too, I think it also comes down to, a lot of it now is a nostalgia factor. Like, I'm seeing, like, comments on, like, social media and stuff like that of people that grew up listening to Odyssey, and now they're sharing with their own kids, and sometimes, like, a 2 or 3 generation thing, like, being passed down from the parents to the kids, and those kids becoming parents, and them having kids, and then those kids going on, because, Odyssey's been around for, I think, 33 years now, and that's, over basically about 3 generations that the show has been around. And again, it's because it keeps on going. People will find out, like, oh yeah, that show's still running, and they might go back and, like, oh yeah, I remember these, and then get hooked again on them.
Absolutely.
And I think the most important, or probably the most prevalent factor in Odyssey's longevity is, I think it has God's blessing on the show. Because at the heart of the show, it was meant to be, Dr. Dobson, he meant it to be a counter, basically, to go counter the culture at the time. I think he was talking with somebody saying that, you can't just complain about the way things are going on right now, the media, the stuff kids are seeing or hearing or watching and experiencing, and not have something to counter that. And because they focus so much on the spiritual aspects of it, a kid that may never go to Sunday school, they might hear an Odyssey episode. They might get it, in a Chick-fil-A kids meal, or they might have a friend down the road that goes to church, let them borrow an album. And, there's been, tons of people that I've read or heard of that, they got saved after, like, listening to Connie become a Christian or Eugene become a Christian. And that's something you can't discount at all, that this is still having an impact today as much as it was, if not more so than it was when the show first started.
Absolutely. Yeah, God's hand has definitely been on the people there. And I mean, maybe this is something we don't think about enough, but it's something worth saying that, we should always be keeping them in their prayers and that, those things are going well and their endeavors. I know that they're certainly praying for us, that these messages reach us and stuff. So gotta be praying for them as well. It's interesting in another sense that this is in a time like this when so many television shows and movies have had to put their production on hold because they can't, maybe there's 2 actors on screen, but there's like 60 to 100 technical people behind the scenes at a shoot. And so they can't film their scenes because of social distancing guidelines. Whereas in a time like this, even if everyone had to record at home with their own vocal booth and mic and send files in, Odyssey could still happen.
They have done that. They have done at least 2 episodes recorded remotely from some of the actors' home studios.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's, God is blessing them. He's prepared them for a time like this, and so, yeah, that's really awesome.
I think it also comes down to, Odyssey, Adventure in Odyssey is entertainment, but it's not just entertainment. It's entertainment with a message, and it presents that message very well. I remember hearing a story, I think folks have put out a video a while back about this girl that grew up listening to Odyssey and was a Christian, but she later drifted away from her faith, and I think she was into drugs and had a very, very immoral life and had a lot of heartache. And one day she went to, I think it was a salon or a barbershop or something. And I can't remember if she was there to have something done, or she worked there. Yeah, I think she may work there, but there was a kid that came in and he had the official guide to Adventures in Odyssey. The big book with, all the stuff about Odyssey with them, reading it while I was there.
Yep.
And she recognized like the pictures or the logo or the name of it or whatever, and she talked to him about it. And I guess she talked quite a bit about it with him. I think she might have been cutting his hair too, and they talked about it. And she didn't know. I think she didn't know that it was still going on. And after work, I think she stopped at a Christian bookstore, and she bought, I think it was the latest Odyssey album. I think it was album 50, The Best Small Town. And she said it's like, coming back home, something to that effect. And that was the start of her coming back to God. And
wow.
And she has a great family now. She got married, had some kids of her own now. And, that's something really powerful there. That's, I think that is probably the major reason Odyssey has lasted so long. It's not just because it's such a great show. It is. It has great characters and great stories. It does. But at the heart of it is the heart to reach kids and their whole family for eternity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said.
Well, did you have anything to add to that, or are you ready to wrap it up?
It's interesting, Dr. Dobson's original vision was to counter culture. I almost disagree that happened, though, in a sense that I think, first of all, I will disagree that should be a goal. Controversial, I guess. But I think what Odyssey has done has not counterculture, but encounter culture. It has come to the culture with an answer, instead of creating a counterculture that is separate from the culture, but a culture that is coming and engaging with the culture. And maybe that's what's intended by the original phrase, but it's come and meeting people. It's come and talking, not like you say, not shying away from the big subjects, but talking about those big subjects so that we're equipping kids, adults alike for the culture that is around them, And also, interestingly enough, when we're talking about culture, there's been a number of great missionary stories or imagination station adventures and things like that are in other locations and things like that to help us remember that the gospel is something that is beyond our own local culture, but is something that is applicable in all cultures, so that we can find the truth, the core truths of it, independent of our own cultures, and bring that to the situation, you know?
But also, too, Odyssey is heard around the world, and especially with the club now. People that don't have a radio station can, if they have access to the internet, they can listen to the Adventure Odyssey Club. I know the official podcast had a couple episodes where they interviewed some of the people or the family members that were like the only people in their country that had Adventure Odyssey Club. And, it's in English, and they have done some Spanish language episodes, radio episodes. It's amazing how, it is, people do know it worldwide, and, especially more likely, more English-speaking cultures or more prominent English-speaking areas. But, it's not just a U.S. show. It's not Odyssey USA.
Totally.
It's not Odyssey USA anymore. It's totally a worldwide thing now.
Totally, and I'm glad. Because as a Canadian, I feel like I feel more welcome in Whit's End when I went. Not that I have anything against the U.S., but I don't know. It's just one of those things that makes it feel more familiar. I'm like, oh yeah, this could totally be a neighborhood near me. And
especially with them not saying what state Odyssey is, it also, I guess, helps the listener claim like, okay, yeah, that's my town. That's my town there.
Mm-hmm. Very smart.
Well, that was a really fun discussion. Thanks so much for joining me, Christopher.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be asked, especially when I know you have so much knowledge on the subject, and I'm comparatively and quite a novice. As much as I love the show, I'm quite a novice comparatively, but it's just a pleasure to be on and just nerd out about Odyssey.
Yeah, it's been really great to have you on here. I don't think we've really discussed Odyssey at a real long length. I know we've chatted about it in the past, so I love getting other perspectives from different people on the show that either have listened to Odyssey for years and or may not still listening to as much, or people that like you mentioned became aware of Odyssey because of a different reason than me. So yeah, it's always fun to have a guest host on the show, and it's great to be able to talk with you. So, if you guys enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to the podcast. This podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and pretty much everywhere else you can find podcasts. And make sure to let me know what you thought of this podcast, if you agreed or disagreed with anything that Christopher and I said, or if there's another reason you think Odyssey has lasted so long. You can do that by emailing me at odysseygeek@gmail.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm at Odyssey Geek. Remember, that's ODYSSEYGEEK. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Bye!
Hi, I'm JD Sutter, host of Audio Theater Central and chair of the ATC Seneca Awards Committee. The Seneca Awards recognize excellence in the world of family-friendly audio drama. The third annual awards for productions released in the year of 2019 is just around the corner, and we want to invite you to tune into the broadcast. Join us on Friday, July 24th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, as we award winners in 11 different categories. In addition to announcing the winners, we'll have guest presenters, short audio drama features, and more. The broadcast will be streamed live at thesenecas.org and on 920 WON The Apple in New York City. For more information, head over to thesenecas.org, and we'll see you on Friday, July 24th at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern.